Hi, everybody, and this is Dr. Dion Klein, and today we're going to be discussing handling stressful situations. I'm sure that many of us, or I know myself and many of my friends, do come under stress at various points in time, and sometimes it does become a bit overwhelming of how we can actually handle it. So today we're just going to discuss 3 ways of how you can handle stressful situations. Here's a little bit about me. I encourage you to please connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search for my name and ask for a request to connect. More than happy to. So first off, what is stress? Look, stress is a normal physical response to events that make you feel threatened or upset your emotional balance in some way. We have it on a day-to-day basis, okay? When you perceive a threat, your nervous system responds by releasing a flood of stress hormones, which includes hormones called adrenaline and also cortisol. And these hormones then rouse the body for emergency action. So we actually have 2 types of stress. The words were first used by Hans Selye. He was actually deemed as the father of stress management, or the father of stress, back in 1975, when he published a model dividing stress into 2 major categories. So we have eustress, which is stress with a positive effect, such as winning a race, being a new parent, riding a roller coaster, watching a scary movie, getting married. So think about all these times that you have a positive effect when you're feeling really elated and happy. Okay, that is also a quote-unquote stressful situation, but it's having a positive effect. And then we have distress, which is that stress that creates this negative effect. And that's the one that people focus upon all the time. What you need to understand is that it doesn't matter if it's eustress or distress. It is actually still, in a sense, putting some resistance or some strain on the body. There's been stories of people having heart attacks from the over positive effect. Now, it's not saying that stress caused that heart attack. I'm not saying that at all. But we do hear things that people feel a bit stressed with such good things happening to them as well. Although, as I said, the media focuses on the effects of how much distress has on society, especially with the healthcare system today. So when we look at what is stress, we have to consider how to deal with stress. And it's actually how we deal with stress that has an effect on our overall system. Okay? And I'm sure that you have friends that all deal with stress differently, right? Some people just, under a very stressful situation, it doesn't seem to faze them. Then other people, the slightest stressful situation, they just go into a total meltdown. So the 3 ways that I'm going to look at today for you is to, first off, change the way you view it or adjust your approach. So the first one is adjusting, and we'll go into these a little bit in more detail later. The second one, steer well clear or avoid the situation that causes you stress. Okay, now, you might see that conflict is a stress, and you might totally want to avoid that conflict. The other side of the coin with that is that if you avoid that conflict, it may make matters worse. So when you look at this one, really look at why you're avoiding the situation, because if you're avoiding it because you don't want to deal with it, but it's still going to be there when you wake up in the morning, you probably just need to get to the bottom of it and just deal with it. The third one is just live with it or accept the situation. And once again, this comes back to people's mindset that they may look at going, well, there's nothing I can do about it, so I'm just going to roll with the punches and adjust and go back to that whole thing, adjusting maybe the way I do my life or whatever, okay? So the 3 ways: adjust, avoid, and accept. And let's look at these in more detail. So once again, stress management involves changing the stressful situation when you can, changing your reaction when you can't, taking care of yourself, and making time for rest and relaxation. We're not going to go into the various methods of how to handle, like how to, cope with stress. That'll be for a later webinar. We're just going to look at how to, in a sense, modify your approaches when presented with a stressful situation. I think this one here is your reaction. That becomes so important. Many times people become very reactive to stress as opposed to responding. Reactive, we don't even take time. There's the trigger, and we just go into our emotional status. Whereas if we respond, we observe it, we take a deep breath, we go, really take in the situation and go, what's actually happening here? And then how should I deal with it? So let's look at the first A, adjusting. Okay, so adjusting your attitude towards a stressful situation. So the first one is thinking positively. If you have a positive mindset, whenever you're given a stressful situation, most people with a positive mindset have a better way of handling it. Okay, so thinking positively, improving your skills. So really getting a bit of emotional intelligence, if you will, of how to handle these stressful situations. The other one is change what you're doing. So, for example, I have friends that work in situations that they really don't like, and maybe some of you on this webinar know people very similar, that they just complain about their job, or complain about relationship, and they just are not willing to change what they're doing. I think it was Einstein who said, if you keep on doing the same thing over and over again with the same result, that basically is an indication of insanity. So if what you're doing is not producing the results that you want, then you need to change what you're doing in effort to get the result that you do want. So some actions for adjusting. Whilst considering the action for adjusting the situation, just make sure the benefit is worth the effort you're going to expend. Right? You need to look at that. Okay, in business we sometimes call it the cost-benefit analysis, and that's in a sense what you need to look at when you're looking at adjusting the situation in regards to stress. Second A is avoid. So avoiding is all about identifying the things that you needlessly stress about and how to remove those items from your daily life. So avoid the situation as appropriate if there's no negative impact on others and the repercussions are non-existent or extremely minor. So one of the situations is you might go, well, yeah, I'll just do that. But you have to also think about other people, of how it's going to impact them. Now, going back to the work situation, you go, look, I just want to remove this work environment from my daily life, and it might disrupt the workplace. Well, that's a bit of a different situation, because they can find another person, right? You have to look at basically taking care of yourself first, your own personal health, right? If you have a family, when you're going to avoid the situation, I would suggest that you sit down with your partner, or with the other family members, to express what is happening and talk it through. This is another thing about stress and stress management, is being able to talk it through with other people, especially those that may be directly involved or possibly even indirectly involved. So actions for avoiding. One of the things is just basically saying no. And when you say no, it actually becomes a very powerful technique. I discussed about saying no in time management, because it's really being set in your power and letting people know, look, this is what I can and cannot do. So saying no followed by an honest explanation. Saying no and then also briefly clarifying your reasoning without making excuses. Saying no and then giving alternative. So an example here is empathetically repeat the request in your own words and then say no, and then provide an assertive refusal and repeat it no matter what the person says. It's really about standing in your power. And many times when I discuss with people about the stressful situations that they may be in, it does come back sometimes that they feel that they just didn't say no. That for some reason the other person just was a bit more of a dominant personality, and they felt like they couldn't say no. Right? So these actions for avoiding is really being set in your own personal power and expressing the situation that you're coming from of why you can't do a particular action, etc. The third A is accepting, like paying a large bill. We live in a society where we have to pay bills. Finances are one of the biggest stressors for everybody, right? We all have to pay bills. As far as I know, all my friends have to pay bills. And when we get a large bill, like just comes out of the blue, and we go, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay this? That is a stressor, right? And I personally have been in that situation, many times over my especially business career and personal life. And I used to just totally have a meltdown with it. And when I got to be a lot stronger and understood the system, I would go, you know what? This is my responsibility. I have to pay the bill. Like, let's just say tax. I would ring the tax department, explain the situation, and work out a payment plan. At the end of the day, a creditor, tax department, whoever, they just want you to pay the money. And even if it's paying in little chunks at a time or little pieces at a time, they do accept that. Okay. So finances are a big one. A lot of people just say, look, I'll avoid it. And I can guarantee from experience is that when you avoid paying that bill, it just gets worse and worse and worse, from my experience. Visiting the doctor, if we have health issues, we may have to visit the doctor for a regular checkup. Making a presentation to a large number of people. That is one of the biggest fears of people. When I talk to students, many of them prefer not to stand up in front of the class and giving a presentation. But it might be part of your job, and you have to accept, well, this is part of my job. I have to do it. Ways that you can deal with that is, go to Toastmasters or take a course in public speaking. Eventually, you have to talk to a colleague you dislike. I remember being in workplaces. There were people I had to work with that we just didn't get on, and had to be in a meeting with them. You got to do it. You can be drastic and leave the workplace because you disliked a colleague, but are you going to do that every workplace you go? Avoid or altering, it would cause undue stress to you or another person. I spoke about that earlier. So there's certain things we just have to accept. The difficult conversation with a boyfriend or girlfriend that you're about to break up with. A tense issue with your partner that you just need to have a discussion and work through it. Right. So we've all been through these challenging situations where we go, I just have to accept it and confront it and deal with it. So actions for accepting: with this model, you're choosing to accept the situation rather than to alter or avoid it. This also, I think, sometimes shows a sense of maturity, is accepting it and, and just working through it. Often you do have that power of choice that can reduce the stress greatly. At the end of the day, it's all about you. And this jar with the world inside of it, it basically shows what's your capacity in handling stress. How do you look at things? Is the jar half full or half empty? I suggest that you take some time out after this webinar and just sit and really reflect on how do you handle stress? How do you handle stress? When things happen, when good things happen to you, how do you handle distress? What are some situations, even going back to that accepting it, what are situations that really challenge your dealing with stress? When the bills come in, people, relationships. Maybe it is driving in traffic that really knocks you around from a stress level. Okay, it's all about you and how you can actually handle the stress. And it's also interesting too, is that when you can handle your stress really well, other people admire you because, and sometimes they might be a bit jealous of you, just because of the maturity and almost in a sense that emotional intelligence and that own personal emotional awareness that you have to go through life on a daily basis and being able to really monitor your stress load and handle it accordingly on a day-to-day basis. I thank you again for your attention, and I'm willing to take questions after the webinar. Thanks very much.